This is what it's all about. Google Search and Google Chrome pre-installed on mobile phones. Back in 2018, European regulators argued the company abused the dominance of its Android operating system by requiring smartphone manufacturers to pre-install both Google programs. The result was the bloc's highest ever antitrust fine. Google appealed, saying the case was unfounded, as users were free to download rival apps and browsers.
The court second chamber hereby, first, dismisses the appeal. Second, orders Google LLC and Alphabet Inc. to bear their own costs and to pay those incurred by the European Commission.
The ruling means Google must now pay 4.125 billion euros. The high-tech company has been in the crosshairs of the European Commission over several alleged antitrust practices. Last year, the Commission fined Google nearly 2.5 billion euros over anti-competitive practices in its online advertising business. EU regulators are now investigating other major high-tech companies, such as Apple and Facebook parent Meta. The cases have become a growing source of tension with Washington. US President Donald Trump has accused the European Union of unfairly targeting American tech firms and has threatened retaliatory tariffs.
And Matthias Kettemann is a leading expert on how governments regulate big tech. He's a professor for innovation theory and philosophy of law at the Institute for Theory and Future of Law at the University of Innsbruck. Thank you so much for joining us. How significant is this ruling, not just for Google, but for the European Commission's entire approach to regulating big tech?
Though it took quite some time for the ruling to be final, the first fine is from 2018, it's still an important step towards a more rights-based international order. Then again, we have to admit that antitrust fines are a last resort. Really good antitrust law usually works before markets are disrupted by antitrust behavior.
Google has argued that Android increased competition by making smartphones cheaper and allowing users to download rivals. Why do you think that the courts rejected that argument?
Because the facts don't make Google's case. If you look at the smartphone market, if you look at the browser market, if you look at the search engine markets, none of those markets are really competitive. Google has a very, very hard case, if it wants to convince regulators that it's helping competition in any of those markets. And we have similar cases in other jurisdictions. All in all, Google has racked up close to 11 billion euros in EU fines in the last years for various antitrust infringements. So the argument that this is pro-competitive behavior is stands on rather weak legs.
The EU has gone after Google, Apple, Meta, and Amazon in previous antitrust cases. Is Europe genuinely leading the world on digital regulation and oversight, or is it simply, filling a vacuum left by other jurisdictions?
A bit of both. It would be unfair to say that the rest of the world innovates and the EU regulates, but we are currently the only big jurisdiction that is providing sensible digital rules on digital markets, on digital services, in the antitrust field, on data, on data governance. So it has fallen upon the European Union to do what other jurisdictions haven't. Namely, watch out that the big companies don't misuse their market power, that they don't use our data too much. I wish, that other jurisdictions did more, so Europe could be a bit more focused on supporting innovation, but it falls upon the European Union to be the world's digital regulator. And it's doing a decent job in that. We've seen some political problems over the past when the Commission was too reluctant to enforce European law because of pressures from the US government. But since the decision here is from a court that is not under political pressure, it was pretty clear that the law, as applied, made a lot of sense.
Critics say that these huge fines become little more than just a cost of doing business for companies that are worth trillions of dollars. Do you think these penalties actually change corporate behavior?
No, the penalties won't change corporate behavior. Let's say you earn 2,000 euros a month, right? It would be only 2 euros, if you compare the fine to the market capitalization of Alphabet, which is at 4.5 trillion, which is basically the same as Germany's gross domestic product. So it is relatively little compared to the market capitalization. But it isn't actually about the fines, I think. It is really more about the signal. Europe says you cannot, walk over European citizens, over European consumers. You have to respect our laws. And after all, if you listen to Google, they will tell you that after the first fine in 2018, they changed a lot of their business practices. So the fact that it took quite so long to, make this judgment final isn't actually changing any business practices at the moment. But the knowledge that you could be fined already in 2018 for anti-competitive business practices, at least from 2018 to now, has already produced some real results. So there won't be any major changes in behavior now based on that judgment, but it's good still that we have it. And it's good because the big players know now that there is a real danger that judgments handed down will stick, even if it takes a couple of years for the courts to finally assess them and make the judgment final.
Matthias Kettemann, thank you.
Pleasure.